Records show less than a month before Donald Trump unleashed an online tirade against the new Gordie Howe Bridge in Windsor, the owner of a competing bridge gave $1 million U.S. to a super PAC aligned with the U.S. president.
They allege Trump's social media post came just hours after U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick met with Matthew Maroon, the billionaire owner of the rival Ambassador Bridge, whose family has long opposed the new crossing. Representative Robert Garcia, the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee, is now demanding details about that meeting and any correspondence between Lutnick, the Maroon family, and the Trump administration. In a letter, Democrats say wealthy donors should not be holding secret meetings with administration officials to influence economic and foreign policies.
Was this ever about a bridge, or about who controls a monopoly over one of North America's most valuable trade choke points? Because after the threats, the backlash, and the donor politics noise, the newest developments point in one direction. The Gordie Howe International Bridge kept advancing as planned. The institutions kept moving, the paperwork kept moving, the commissioning kept moving. And the people most dependent on this corridor, manufacturers, unions, logistics firms, and Michigan officials across party lines, refused to let a critical trade lifeline become a political hostage. Major construction is complete, and the Bridge Authority says the work has shifted into testing and commissioning. The final pre-opening phase that prepares the crossing to operate safely and reliably is done with. And on the U.S. side, Customs and Border Protection has already taken the formal step that matters most for operations. That is a final rule designating the Gordie Howe International Bridge as a port of entry, effective March 2, 2026, with CBP stating it will issue a public notice when the crossing is fully operational and open. The noise got louder, but the paperwork kept moving. Because the storm started the way storms often start in 2026, with a social media post that tried to turn an infrastructure project into leverage. On February 9th, President Donald Trump threatened to block the opening of the Canadian-funded bridge linking Windsor, Ontario, and Detroit, Michigan, demanding concessions and framing the project as one more front in a wider U.S.-Canada grievance list. The bridge, built to reduce congestion and add redundancy at one of North America's most important trade corridors, was suddenly treated like a bargaining chip. And that's what made the moment so destabilizing. Not because the bridge itself was in doubt, but because the threat suggested that a decade of planning, binational agreements, and regulatory approvals could be held hostage to political mood. To understand why this got so heated so fast, you have to understand what this crossing represents. The Detroit-Windsor corridor is one of the most significant gateways between Canada and the United States. It is deeply tied to auto manufacturing, but it also moves agricultural goods, industrial inputs, and time-sensitive freight that depends on predictable border flow. When that corridor gets squeezed, the shock doesn't remain at the river. It travels outward, into assembly lines, supplier networks, shipping schedules, and consumer prices. This is why the bridge exists. It's a 6-lane modern crossing designed to connect major highway systems, Ontario's Highway 401 and Michigan's Interstate 75, so heavy trucks don't have to funnel through local streets to reach the interstate network. And the economic logic isn't speculation. Reuters has pointed to a University of Windsor study estimating the bridge could reduce crossing time by around 20 minutes and generate long-term savings measured in the billions over decades. But there is another layer, and it's the layer that keeps returning no matter how many times officials try to keep the story clean. For decades, the Ambassador Bridge, privately owned by the Maroon family, has been the dominant truck-capable crossing in that area. When you have a corridor that carries critical freight and only one major private bridge reliably absorbing truck traffic, that's not just commerce. That's structural power. And the Gordie Howe Bridge is not just new infrastructure. It is competition. It is redundancy. It is the end of a near monopoly over a strategic choke point. That is why Trump's threat set off alarms inside Michigan. Even before the investigations and allegations of influence, the immediate pushback came from the people who understand the corridor best. That is, state leaders, local leaders, and industry voices. They warned that delaying or blocking the bridge would hurt Michigan workers and Michigan businesses first. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer's office was blunt, one way or another, the bridge is going to open. And the Associated Press reported a key detail that showed how far the White House was willing to go rhetorically. It cited White House statements suggesting Trump could try to amend the presidential permit for the project. This means the fight wasn't about concrete. It was about federal authority and whether Washington could weaponize bureaucracy to create delay. Still, the record underneath the rhetoric didn't change. The bridge is rooted in a binational framework established by the Canada-Michigan Crossing Agreement, publicly documented and long in place. The financing model has also been repeatedly described in official and public sources. Canada fronted the project costs, with costs to be recouped through toll revenues over time. And public reporting has consistently noted that Michigan has an ownership stake in the project. One reason Michigan leaders viewed the threats as self-harm, dressed up as nationalism. This is the contradiction that made Trump's claim so combustible. On the one hand, the bridge has moved through years of approvals and operational planning. On the other hand, a sudden political threat tried to rewrite the story as if the U.S. had been cut out or disrespected. And yet, within the same timeline, the U.S. government had already acted in ways that confirm the bridge is meant to operate as part of the federal border system. The clearest example is the CBP Port of Entry Rule. On January 30th, CBP published a final rule that formally establishes the Gordie Howe International Bridge as a port of entry, effective March 2nd, 2026, and states CBP will notify the public when the crossing is fully operational and open. This is not a symbolic gesture. It is the institutional act of integrating a new crossing into U.S. Customs and Immigration Administration. Then, on February 6th, the Bridge Authority stated that major construction was complete and that testing and commissioning work was ramping up. That's the pre-opening stage where systems are validated, staff procedures are finalized, and operations are prepared for real traffic conditions. Now connect the sequence. A federal rule is issued to establish the bridge operationally. Construction transitions into commissioning. And then, after those steps are already underway, Trump posts that he intends to block the opening. That contrast is why the story didn't die after the first headline. It deepened. Because once the bridge became leverage, the question immediately followed. Leverage for whom? That is where the influence story enters the frame. House Oversight Democrats formally demanded records and communications related to the controversy, including letters to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and to Ambassador Bridge owner Matthew Marone, framing the situation as a potential attempt by private interests to delay or block a publicly financed competitor. Axios reported Oversight Democrats sought Marone's communications with Trump officials about the bridges and referenced reporting that Marone met with Lutnick on Feb 9, hours before Trump's public threat. The Financial Times added another element that fueled suspicion in the political arena, a filing showing a $1 million donation by Marone to a pro-Trump super PAC. That was just weeks before Trump attacked the rival bridge, with denials from the White House and the PAC that any link existed. Whether or not investigations ultimately prove improper influence, the public impact is already real. The perception that a private monopoly might be protected through political pressure is enough to shake confidence, especially in a corridor where industry relies on predictability. And that brings us to the economic cost of even a short delay. A study cited in Michigan business coverage warned that postponing the bridge opening could cost up to $7 million per week in direct losses, with wider ripple effects likely far greater because of the damage to trade fluidity and supply chain reliability. In a region where manufacturing operates on tight timing and thin margins, uncertainty is not a neutral condition. It is a cost that accumulates fast. So where does that leave the story now, after the threats, the backlash, and the investigations? Here is what continued as planned looks like in real terms. It looks like the bridge authority publicly stating the project has moved into testing and commissioning with major construction complete. It looks like CBP's port of entry rule already being effective as of March 2nd, with the public notice to follow when the crossing is fully operational. It looks like Michigan officials continuing to state the bridge will open, and trade and industry voices treating the opening as an economic necessity rather than a political option. And it looks like this. The legal and administrative framework has not shifted simply because President Trump threatened it online. This is very important for everyone to understand. First came the threat. Then came the fact-based rebuttal from Michigan leaders and the quiet insistence from Canada that the agreement stands. Then came the investigations into whether private interests were influencing public policy. And through all of it, the pre-opening machinery kept moving. There is commissioning on the ground and port of entry designation on paper. So yes, the political drama was real. The oversight response was real. The economic stakes were real. But the newest developments show something else is real too. The bridge's opening process is still advancing under the original plan. Because the institutional groundwork was laid years ago, the operational steps are already in motion, and the cost of stopping it is too high for the corridor that depends on it. Trump's threat created a week of chaos. But it didn't rewrite the legal record, the financing model, or the operational pathway. The bridge kept moving because the economic cost of stopping it is too high, and because Michigan itself has too much to lose. And that's the real takeaway. In 2026, power isn't only missiles and tariffs. Power is choke points. Power is permits. Power is the ability to delay what the public already paid for. Now the question is this. When the bridge opens, will the monopoly finally break? Or will politics find a new way to keep the old gatekeepers in control? This is Liberation Lens. Perspective has never mattered more.